Hello and welcome to the Japan Politics Podcast. And this week I want to talk about how the LDP, the governing party of Japan, who I've talked about in the past being in a little bit of trouble for various reasons and suffering a little bit in the polls, now they appear to be effectively buying their way out of trouble potentially, based on their plan, which is to give out a sum of money to everyone in Japan, which is quite radical. And they're pledging to give out 20,000 yen, around that figure, which is about $139 roughly. And the idea behind this is that Japan is currently having a bit of problem with inflation. There's also a bit of a rice crisis, which is making a shortage of rice, and rice is more expensive. I don't think it's particularly aimed at the rice problem, but it's aimed at generally easing the burden on families, this plan, and to sort of impact their ability to spend and sort of counteract inflation is the general plan, I believe, that Ishiba and the LDP are planning with this cash giveaway. But obviously, it's coming up to July when there's going to be an upper house election. And apart from that, Ishiba is facing a variety of problems. So it's interesting to think, is this him effectively just buying his way out of trouble by giving everyone a sum of money? He's also done measures recently like increasing the amount of funding he gives to families to fund schooling. So it seems like a package of measures he's done in cooperation with other parties when getting legislation through to sort of ease the burden on people and effectively buy support. You could, if you're looking at it charitably, you could say. So the plan with this is that the 20,000 yen is going to be double for children. And it's sort of funny to think that Ishiba got in trouble in the gift scandal when he was giving out sums of money to lawmakers, first-year lawmakers, in order for them to buy suits was the idea. It's like a bit of a nice token gift. But this was seen as being inappropriate for him to do that, even though it was his personal money. So I don't think he ended up in any sort of legal trouble for that, but it was seen as inappropriate and reflecting badly on him. But it's funny, he's not allowed to give out a personal gift to a few lawmakers, but he can, through government revenue, give out a gift to everyone. It's quite funny the way it's worked out, that he was in trouble or suffered in the polls for giving out a gift to lawmakers, but now he's the government is proposing to give out money to everyone. So yeah, he's planning to give out this sum of money, and he's been quoted as saying that this is to help combat inflation. And the idea is that he's aiming to show that wage increases can outpace inflation, and inflation in Japan hit 3.5% in April. So this is the sort of the problem he's seeking to address, really. Whereas the CDP, the main opposition party, who have been speaking on and off about the possibility, the leader has at least, the possibility of calling a no confidence motion and the possibility of having a double election in seeking to unseat Ishiba and make him call like a general election. He's said this is an impulsive move, and I suppose you can sort of see where he's coming from, because my concern about this would be this plan to give out a large sum of money is, maybe you could call it a little reckless, because he hasn't quite dealt with the tariff threat he's facing from Trump. So it's very good to say this is aiming to deal with inflation. Maybe that would work, and it will prove a net positive for Japan and the economy and help ordinary families. If that works, that's very positive, of course. But what happens if he fails to seek up a trade agreement with Trump? I suppose Ishiba knows more than me how likely the prospect of a trade deal is. He'll be in these conversations. But say if he doesn't, and these tariffs in general and Trump's plans for a particular tariff on cars keep going, then Ishiba might be in a situation where he has to effectively support the Japanese car industry, which is very important to Japan, and that's going to require a sum of money, and he might be wishing that he had a bit more of a war chest to do that. And what if he's already given away this sum of money to everyone in Japan to help fight inflation? He might be wishing that maybe he'd held on to that money, or he hadn't pledged this plan, if he ends up having a prolonged sort of a trade dispute with America and he's having to support, Japanese car industry. Or if he can't do that as a result, he's then watching the car industry struggle, or even job loss or a loss of industry. But yeah, anyway, in any case, it'll be very interesting to think about whether this is going to work, whether this will actually come to pass, and what impact this could have on the election in July. But we'll just have to wait and see in that respect, and wait to see what happens with inflation and whether he ends up giving this this handout effectively of 20,000 yen. But it'd be very interesting. Moving on from that, I've mentioned the rice crisis, and it seems that Koizumi, the new rice minister who's just been appointed and who ran in the election against Ishiba, but then ended up supporting him and has now become the new farming minister. He appears to have been quite active on this rice crisis. He's looking to really tackle it. Some things he's done is he's effectively threatened to flood the market with more foreign rice. Maybe that's a bit of a move to sort of prod suppliers and prod people to, to, if you're holding on to rice, get it into the supply chain, because you might be holding on to it hoping the prices are going to go high. But that's going to be useless if he brings in lots of cheaper foreign rice. That's purely speculation on my part. I don't know how much that's actually taking place. But it could be that he's just using that as a threat to sort of encourage people to sell their rice now while the price is relatively high, and that will hopefully cascade. If people start releasing their rice, it will get it lower. Or maybe just he's prodding people to just be a bit quicker, more efficient for fear of this foreign rice coming in. But yeah, that's quite dramatic given that there's sort of tariff controls on foreign rice, and it sort of seems a very important industry for obvious reasons, rice growing in Japan, and it's very traditional, attuned with the culture of Japan, very symbolic. So for him to even suggest that he might bring in lots of foreign rice is quite something. So that's really a big move. Whether he actually does that in reality, or whether, as I say, he's just prodding people, hoping to get a result and to get things moving a bit quicker and to get the price lower, is interesting to see. Because he has released this limited amount of older stockpiled rice, but that hasn't entirely fixed the problem. I believe it is coming in and it is being cheaper, but I think it's sort of a limited amount of supply. Although he is also saying apparently that he's planning to release the entire stockpile that Japan has into the system in an effort to get more rice into the ecosystem and to get prices lower. So if he manages to do that, that'd be very impressive. It'd be a big move, and we'll have to see what that does coming up to the July election in terms of moving the needle and getting the price lower. And he's also, he appears in general to be quite active. Koizumi, he's appearing in the media a lot more, just on my limited perspective, more than his predecessor was. He seems to be quite active, getting a lot more media attention, and drumming up a lot of energy and eyeballs on what he's doing to get the rice price lower, and he appears quite active. But so we'll have to wait and see, as I say, in the long run, whether this works or not. But it appears he's really aiming to, still a bit of energy, like I say. Another recent thing he's done is he's looking at potentially the agriculture ministry stopping the rice index, which has been going for about 7 decades, I believe. This is a bit complicated for me to follow, but I believe the reason he's saying is that effectively farmers might be looking at the rice index and misunderstanding the numbers, and so he's wondering whether it's the most effective method to have this data published in that way. But it's just another example of how he appears quite active on all fronts, and it will be interesting to see if that follows up with the rice price in general lowering. And he's been rewarded, Koizumi, almost immediately with a recent poll, and this has been conducted by the Sankei Shinbun / FNM poll, and this is asking people who they feel would be the most suitable next PM for Japan. And in the past, I've speculated about who the next Prime Minister of Japan could be, and it sort of seemed that there wasn't 100% clear figure. It was a bit of a divided field, but that maybe Seinai, as the previous second place winner and at one point the front runner when she was running against Ishiba, she appeared to be the default figure that people were thinking about. There's been other figures that have been floated, like the leader of the DPFP, for example, if there was some sort of coalition to happen. Well, Koizumi's been rewarded for his efforts, and I did say that potentially there's been people saying that this could be, his big job in his CV to make him look more creditable as a potential future PM if he does a good job in this. He's been rewarded immediately by this poll because he's come out on top with 20.7% of people saying in this poll that he's the most suitable next PM. So that's a good result for him immediately. Bear in mind he finished third in the election, but he got a fairly respectable result, and then he supported the eventual winner Ishiba, and he's also leapfrogged Seinai Takeichi, who's on 16.4%. And if you narrow this poll down to just LDP supporters rather than sort of general respondents, his number is still number one, but it rises further to 27.7% among LDP supporters. So it appears that him getting himself in the media and appearing quite active and energetic, just based on this one poll, appears to be paying off. So if he can follow through, this would be very good for the LDP, I think, to address this rice crisis and show that the government can be supportive, and also could be very good for him personally. And there's already fruits of that based on just his appearance of being busy and trying to do a good job on this, which suggests that if he actually does address the crisis and get the rice price down, the rewards for that could be even larger. And I really think the key things going into July at the moment are how LDP responds to crises. I mean, you really want to appear as the long-standing party of government as like the sensible long-term solution for Japan, who can address a crisis. And so if the LDP can be seen to address this rice issue, but also I think the looming threat of the tariffs, and I believe Ishiba is currently undergoing discussions in Canada, and there's ongoing talks with the USA about a potential deal. If he can get that, that is so gigantic, I think, for the prospects to just to show that the LDP can handle this situation. And there were sort of voices like Seinai Takechi calling for sort of more dramatic movements on this. Like she said that maybe there should be a trade dispute with the USA, but Ishiba's remained fairly calm and has been fairly diplomatic with Trump. And if that pays off his approach and he appears, to have been sensible, played the long game and got a good result, that will be massive for him. But at the moment, there hasn't yet been a result. I believe these talks are dragging on at the moment. And in contrast, the UK has recently just got a trade deal with Trump, and there's a quote that's floating out there about this UK-US trade deal where Trump's saying, or the US is saying that the UK is going to be protected from tariffs, and the quote is "because I like them," which is quite something. It's very personal, that statement. And I think the issues that Japan might have closing this deal is that maybe Trump sees the security arrangement where the US supplies a guarantee to defend Japan, and also US troops, and also the current trade balance, which Trump would like addressed a bit more. He maybe sees that as a bit more uneven. So possibly Japan might have a bit of a harder time to win Trump over than the UK has, where he's got long-standing ties to them, and there's maybe a bit more of a personal affection. So Ishiba's going to have to just work that bit harder to really try and sell this deal. But if he does pull it off, it might just be seen as that bit more successful. Now, I'd like to also talk about a long-standing thing that I've been talking about, which is the attempt to sort of revitalize the countryside, which is something that Ishiba's talked about. And this comes up a lot in context to Japan's birth rate and the rate at which Japan is aging. And Ishiba said in the past that sort of revitalizing the countryside is the key to sort of get more births into Japan, revitalize Japan, get the population growing. And I think maybe that's lost a bit of focus because Ishiba's got a minority government and he's had to do a bit of firefighting. He's doing a lot of deals just to get legislation through because he's in a minority government, and he's dealing with crises like the rice issue and the Trump trade tariffs, which have come in. So maybe he hasn't as much time to focus on this. But there has been a recent story where there's been a plan to address this, and the idea is that ideally you'd want more people from urban areas coming in and moving out to live in rural areas. But instead, there's going to be an effort to sort of register links between the two. So I think the idea is you're going to have people register links they have to municipalities. I'm not quite sure exactly how that would work. Perhaps if you've got family in like a different area, you'll register that. Or if you came from the countryside and then you moved to work in Tokyo, which is a very common thing as the population of Tokyo is growing and growing. Perhaps that's something you could then register in this system, and then the areas you have connections with will sort of go into it. And the idea is this is all going to be done via an app, and that's going to encourage you, if you live in urban areas, to go out to these areas where you've got registered a sort of a connection with them, where you've registered a link with these regional areas. And so you might not necessarily get more people moving to regional areas, but maybe it's to sort of encourage them to spend more of their time there, get more footfall, a bit more tourism, a bit more visits, and sort of foster closer ties between people who live in urban areas and regional areas, which could sort of help just get more footfall and encourage activity in regional areas and get their economy going a bit, even if it's not necessarily getting people moving there and growing the population that way. An example of this is Haida, which in Japan, which has a fan club, And I believe what they do there is they have a certain amount of followers or members in this fan club of this Japanese town. And then what they do is they offer these members of this fan club discounts at shops and hotels. So you're effectively providing fan club members, updates like, we've got this going on in the town and we're offering you this discount, and it's sort of an incentive and a reminder to go and visit that area. And that's seen some success, I believe, in terms of getting people to sign up to be a fan of this town and then to go and visit, which I think is a very smart idea, and just you could get lots of like nice regional areas doing this, saying, oh, we've got this festival on, we've got available hotels on this date, why don't you come visit, we've got this discount if you do so. It seems like a very smart idea to sort of remind people about the possibility and encourage them to go and visit. And it also it'd be interesting if you could marry this up to efforts to sort of fight over tourism, where it's very focused on sort of key areas, like you have lots of tourists going to Kyoto, for example. Maybe you could link this up somehow with these fan clubs, and if you could get more Japanese people interested in going there, maybe you could feed that into like a general tourism strategy where you get more tourists going into these regional areas as well. Just an interesting idea to throw out there. And it's the idea, I think, is that maybe they're going to take the example of this town with this fan club, Hida, and they're possibly going to go more national with that idea and just get people to register links to different areas, and then they'll be showing them like more information about the city. And then I don't know if there'll be incentives like you have in Hida, like you'll get a discount on this day, or if it's just going to be general information on this app. But I think it's a very interesting idea to encourage more ties between the urban areas and the regional areas and get people more moving out more. It's a good first step if it works effectively. It's an interesting idea, but I think for me in the long term, just my personal opinion, I think there needs to be more in the way of showing, these regional areas, it's got cheaper and lower rent than Japan. Maybe this is somewhere where you could open a business. If you've got a corporate office, maybe you could move that corporate office out there and save the money you'd pay for like really expensive Tokyo floor space. And it might be harder to get employees out there, but maybe the cheaper rents also for employees might be an incentive to get people to move out there and sort of encourage more jobs to go out regionally rather than just being so focused on Tokyo. But maybe this is a good first step where you get people visiting more regional areas, and then you could lead into that sort of thing. And also another thing to maybe think about is, emphasizing regional areas that have trade links with Tokyo and other urban areas, or maybe encourage revitalizing transport links and just really encourage and emphasize areas where it's easier to travel to from urban areas to get sort of maybe think about businesses going out that way as well as tourism visiting. But I think this is a very interesting, a very smart idea, and have to see how well this app develops and if it has any impact on getting a bit more activity in these regional areas as a first step to this Ishiba plan he's talked about to sort of revitalize areas other than the urban centers. But yeah, that really rounds out the show, guys. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Japan Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Whitaker. Sayonara, goodbye.